When we look at the classics of science fiction film and TV, we discover an open testing ground for the ideas of the future. In science fiction, we find not merely space battles or alien civilizations. We encounter technological prophecies about how we will live and communicate in times to come. In this series, we'll explore how classic and contemporary science fiction imagined the future of communication, especially language technology and AI. And we'll see in many cases just how close those visions come to our present day. Today we're diving into Arrival, a brilliant sci-fi film by Denis Villeneuve that every translator and linguist should watch at least once, possibly twice.
Hello and welcome back to this TBO Talk. In this second installment of our series, we're going up the zero-gravity elevator to get up close and personal with some very chatty and some very lovable characters. Today's film, Arrival, directed by Denis Villeneuve, is generally considered a classic of contemporary sci-fi cinema. It depicts an in-depth linguistic exchange between a crack squad of human researchers and an enigmatic alien civilization known as the Heptapods, which means literally the seven-footed ones. As we saw in the previous episode on Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, science fiction movies have long been home to all sorts of explorations about how language technology and AI affect our communication, our culture, and overall vibe, whether today or in an imagined future. Arrival is no exception.
Featuring a conspicuous and somewhat unsurprising homage to 2001, Arrival invites us to meditate on the possibility or the impossibility of free will, as well as the impact that language has on our consciousness. In this program, we will mostly be sidestepping some of these loftier issues and will focus rather on the role of language technology in the film. Note, if you haven't seen the movie yet, there are some minor spoilers ahead, but nothing major.
At the beginning of the film, before we discover the Heptapods' now iconic circular writing style, we see that the researchers' initial approach to this new language is by listening to recordings of the Heptapod speech, which turns out to be completely unintelligible. No spoilers there. So, to help make sense of this spoken language, which will be known as Heptapod A, our protagonist Louise Banks uses a special kind of software that converts audio recordings into visual representations known as spectrograms. Like many of the other gizmos shown in the film, this is actually real-world technology. By converting a spoken language into spectrograms, we can essentially look at sound with our eyes, and thereby we can attempt to identify patterns, characteristics, or any kind of meaning that might be difficult or simply impossible to perceive by hearing alone.
After spending some time with the spectrograms, Louise realizes that while it's a good start, looking at the frequencies is a bit of a dead end. She then determines that the heptapods probably have a written language as well, which should be easier to decipher. This turns out to be true, and the team starts hosting some show and tell sessions with the heptapods, using a lo-fi but completely legit whiteboard to introduce basic human words in written form, all the while accompanying them with simple actions and greetings for context.
In short order, the team finds itself face to face with the elegant and enigmatic Heptapod B, the heptapod's written language, which looks suspiciously like that mark you get after leaving a brimming hot cup of coffee on your favorite notebook. So, once the team realizes that they have a written language to work with, they waste no time in developing a custom suite of software and hardware tools to help them decode, understand, and eventually communicate with their visitors. As the team's tech stack becomes more sophisticated throughout the film, we can identify a variety of inputs and influences on its development process. These range from manual pen-on-paper analysis to statistical and mathematical modeling, from philosophy and experiential research protocols to a battery of machine learning algorithms, aka AI. So, let's take a look at the role of AI, or machine learning, in this epic encounter. How would we use a machine learning model to help us decode Heptapod B, that very exotic and unfamiliar written language?
Well, we would start by putting together a good old-fashioned bilingual corpus, which is exactly what they do in the film. Now, let's keep in mind that the human's goal in the film is to eventually understand the reason for the heptapod's visit to our planet.
Since they don't know how to ask sophisticated questions in Heptapod B, such as, "What is your purpose on Earth?" the team starts by establishing a mutual understanding of basic words and concepts, with the idea of building up their vocabulary over time. They begin by demonstrating simple, fundamental human words to the heptapods, such as human and walking, while recording the heptapod's reactions to these words and concepts. Within this research methodology, these human words and concepts are considered as stimuli, or inputs, and they are also recorded as part of the bilingual corpus. Simultaneously, the team captures the heptapod's reactions to these stimuli, taking pictures and video recordings of their written responses, which are also added to the bilingual corpus. This collection of inputs and their corresponding outputs, aka the bilingual corpus, can now be used as training data for the AI, or the machine learning algorithm.
Now you might be asking, what kind of machine learning algorithm exactly? Well, in the film, there are a variety of algorithms that are most likely being used. Let's start by explaining the difference between supervised and unsupervised algorithms.
Supervised basically means that we have a collection of things that we know about, as well as another set of things that we don't really know about. The algorithm, an artificial neural network in this case, analyzes each thing that we don't understand, such as a word in the foreign language, while comparing them with a predefined label that represents something we do know about, such as a word in our language. Each output of the research session goes in with a label, which is the human word that we used as the input for the research process.
This combination of an unknown sample with a known and related label is precisely what makes this a supervised learning algorithm, one that is capable of mapping out the relationship between the two languages and eventually producing usable translations between the two.
We can observe a practical implementation of this technique in one of the first iterations of the team's tablet interface. In this clip, we can see the app working in real time. It processes a live video feed of a new sentence in Heptapod B and matches it with a list of related human words on the right side of the screen. The word list doesn't spell out an exact sentence, but it starts to give us a kind of network of related concepts, or a gist. Later, we observe another application of machine learning, but one which we could consider unsupervised learning.
Here, a custom software tool identifies key points within a sentence of Heptapod B. It tags them with blue dots and displays their relationships with other key points within that word or sentence, using lines to show relevance or strong relationships. Since this algorithm is uncovering features that are entirely relevant with the target language and are probably independent of external labels, we can call this an example of unsupervised machine learning. As in the real world, complex research projects can and do use a combination of supervised and unsupervised learning methods to develop new technologies, which we're about to see.
In the film's final act, the team has arrived at a more feature-rich, interactive translation tool, which allows the user to select from a rich glossary of pre-identified components from Heptapod B and put together a full sentence or a question directly in that language. So after Luis selects the components for the big question in Heptapod B, we see another machine learning routine running in the background on a different set of screens. Here, the app takes the components that Luis selected for the new sentence and runs them through a large number of possible configurations before fitting them into the best possible arrangement, considering what it has learned about the Heptapod B language.
By this point, we can basically observe that the full app is using both supervised and unsupervised machine learning to flesh out its full functionality. First, supervised learning helps to map the connections between English and Heptapod B, and secondly, unsupervised learning works on mastering the fine points of Heptapod B in and of itself. So now, the team finally reaches the point where they can use their app to deliver the message, "What is your purpose on Earth?"
Spoiler alert, the Heptapod's answer comes back via translation as "deliver weapon," which proves both uncomfortable and highly ambiguous, leading to the film's high-stakes crescendo involving the threat of global annihilation, game theory, and a red-headed translator going rogue. Cue worldwide meltdown, and it is now up to our protagonist to time travel mentally into the future and figure out an elegant solution to the whole situation. So, anyone familiar with current practices in translation or the language service industry will recognize most of these language tech elements shown in the film, but perhaps with different names.
The tablet that Louise uses is essentially what we would call a CAT tool, or a computer-assisted translation tool. The bilingual corpus is akin to a translation memory, meaning a list of translator-approved, basically equivalent sentences in two different languages. The tablet that Louise uses to show real-time concept matches is what we might call the concordance window, or a term-based manager. The more sophisticated version of the tablet that we see at the end is essentially a fully functioning machine translation device.
So, what to make of this? Well, although the film does go into some very deep philosophical territory, it also does a very handy job at showcasing the capabilities of our current civilization when it comes to systematizing linguistic discovery and facilitating intercultural communication. For those of us working in the field of language services, Arrival is, in a way, a kind of love letter to the world of translators and the glorious life they live. But before we wrap things up on this video, what are some of those big philosophical themes that Arrival is famous for? Well, apart from some pretty heavy meditations on parenting, one of the big issues is essentially a what if, namely, what if learning a new language could allow you to see into the future? In the film, Luis essentially gains this ability, but never really tells anyone about it. Then, in the film's final montage, we see Luis unboxing her new guidebook to Heptapod B, which is about to be launched for widespread adoption. So, what will the consequences for humanity be? This is one of the big questions that the film does not actually explore.
Does this mean we're going to get a sequel?
Well, according to the original novella, The Story of Your Life, written by Ted Chiang, the widespread dissemination of Heptapod B could be highly problematic for humanity.
Why is that?
Because it allows the individual to know the future and could thus unleash some very strange paradoxes that could destroy our current perception of reality, one in which the future is undetermined and subject to actions taken under free will. For example, how would people behave if everyone knew the future? Would anything change? Would everything change? Would it be an instant worldwide freakout into something really weird? Or simply a generalized acceptance of something weirdly real? This particular what if is so big that if Arrival had a sequel, it could easily be adapted as a long-form series instead of a single movie. And speaking of long-form adaptations, we can now reveal the next film in this TBO Talk series, Ghost in the Shell, an all-time classic of Japanese anime that offers a unique and highly influential vision of AI unleashed into a cyber future. Alright, so see you next time, and thanks for watching.